Hi everyone. Today we're going to go over the how your unconscious mind rules your behavior, the first chapter summary of it, the new unconscious. So typically when we think of our day-to-day actions, we think that a lot of our decision making is governed by effortful thinking, conscious decision making, conscious behaviors, and actions that we think that we're very aware of. We think that we act in very rational ways. We think that we're very logical creatures. But in reality, what this chapter argues in this book is that a lot of our behaviors and a lot of the decisions that we make are actually unconscious. They're automatic. There's something that we're not fully aware about. But there's this entire section of our mind called the unconscious mind that actually governs a lot of our decision-making process that we don't even see and that we don't even notice. So, for example, whenever you're walking, whenever you're talking, whenever you're breathing, whenever you have these knee-jerk reactions or you have these instant reactions to certain things, a lot of that's not actually governed by your conscious mind. You're not putting in a lot of effort really thinking about it. You're not aware about it. Your automatic, your unconscious mind sort of takes care of those certain actions. And so these are really hidden yet powerful forces at work that really guide our habitual thinking and behavior. And you may think that, okay, if a lot of our unconscious mind is actually governing these behaviors, what does that mean? Well, this is actually very essential for survival. If you're solving a difficult math question or if you're just avoiding a snake bite, these knee-jerk, these quick reactions or our automatic unconscious mind can handle very quickly and efficiently. So it's having the power of the unconscious mind is actually essential for our survival as a species. We typically use our conscious mind or effortful thoughts, effortful thinking when we're solving a difficult problem, when we're more aware of the problems that we're solving, when we're aware of the situation that we're in. Whenever we're reacting to something or we're avoiding a snake bite or we just see a car and we just get past it, the speed and efficiency of the unconscious mind is able to really save us and help us out. So it's evolutionary, it's been a pivotal part in our development as the human species. And this first chapter really gives a couple really strong fundamental examples in how we tend to be influenced by a lot of these small details in our day-to-day lives that we don't even see. And they actually prime our unconscious mind and really prime it for the decisions that we make. So we'll go through a couple of these very interesting examples. And from this, the objective is that you'll become more aware on sort of the workings of your unconscious mind, how your unconscious mind actually governs and guides a lot of the decisions that you actually make and sort of what we think that they're not there and we're sort of completely unaware of. And so one of the common things about our unconscious mind is people tend to favor traits that are similar to our own, even something as meaningless as our names. So one of the examples that they give in the book is that if you look at, they did this study where if you look at certain groom surnames versus bride maiden names, and what they realized, they created this whole chart and they realized that actually Smiths marry more Smiths 3 to 5 times as often as they marry Johnsons, Williams, Jones, and Browns. And they saw that Johnsons marry way more Johnsons than they do the other names. Jones way more often than they do the other names, and same thing with the Browns. So what we've seen from this sort of study is that people are very attracted to the details that are similar to them. In this case, even in marriage, we see that. And you would typically think that in terms of like marriage and attraction, like a person's name wouldn't really provide that much detail into how much attraction uh, two people have with one another. But this actually provides a lot of meaningful information and really affects our unconscious mind. And so this was a really incredible study and finding that they had in regards to these names. And so another essential portion of this is the way that something is presented to us and the way that something is marketed to us actually influences our subconscious mind more than we think that it actually does. So they did this. They did a lot of studies, and one of the things that they found is that a dish is description, like the description of a particular dish or a particular food item that they're eating, actually plays a very important factor in how it actually tastes to us. So they did this study in where they sort of labeled this food item as like a very extravagant food item, and they essentially had the same food item just in a more boring label at a different restaurant. And what they realized after they ended the study was that the people, even though it was the same food item, the people who actually went to the restaurant and had the had a more fancier name, they actually gave higher levels of happiness and enjoyment from the dish itself. Even though the food was exactly the same, they perceived the more extravagant labeled food to uh, to be more tastier, even though they were exactly the same. So here we can really see that how these small details and how something is just presented to us or marketed to us really affects our unconscious mind and really affects how we even perceive that particular thing to be. There's also this thing called the fluency effect, which suggests that if something is presented to us in a very difficult manner that's really hard to comprehend or hard to understand, that influences our judgment about the substance of the material. So they did this other study where they gave a group of people a recipe to read in a very difficult font, and they gave another group of people a different recipe to read, and it was in a much cleaner font, and it was very easy to digest. And what they realized was that the people who were given the harder to read font, a harder to read recipe with the hard font to read, they rated the recipe as more difficult. Even though the recipe was exactly the same, the people who got the harder to read font rated that as more difficult. So we can see this fluency effect in action where the more difficult something is and that's presented to us, we're going to perceive it, the substance of that material as more difficult. They did this other study in the England supermarket where they on one day they played German music, and what they realized is that 73% of the wine that was sold there was actually German, and then on the days that they played French music, 77% of the wine that was sold there was French. So you can see just by like having these small cues in the environment actually affects a lot of the human decision making. Even something as small as like the type of music in the supermarket that was playing actually had an influence in the type of decisions and the things that they purchased. So we can see that these little details, even in our environment, even though we're unaware of it, actually has a significant impact on the decisions that we make. They did this other study and finding, and this is also called the expectancy theory, which is the thing that we sort of attract what we expect. And so they had this $90 beer and versus this $10 beer. It was exactly the same beer. But what they realized is that the people who had actually bought the $90 version of the beer, even though it was the same exact beverage, the people who had the $90 beer actually rated more, gave more ratings of happiness and pleasure, even though obviously it was the same. The substance was exactly the same, the way it was marketed and perceived, and the price of it, because the price of it was different, people expected that the higher priced wine would obviously taste better. And so this is what we call the expectancy theory. People expect, people receive what they expect, even though obviously the substance was the same because it was marketed differently, because it was presented in a different way that influenced their judgment about the substance of the thing. And then another final example was that investors, they did the study again, and they realized that investors were more likely to invest in the IPO of companies whose names or tickers were easier to pronounce. So this goes back to the fluency effect, where just because their names were actually easier to pronounce, that subconsciously or unconsciously influenced their entire decision-making process, and that actually affected their investment decisions as well. So we see in this chapter that there's many different instances where even small details within our environment, even little things, even things that we may not even notice, can really influence our decision making. And this really is due to the unconscious mind, which is actually very essential for survival as a species. But there are these hidden forces at work that play that really guide our decision making. Even though we think we are rational creatures, we often act in very irrational ways. And this is just one part in sort of exploring that irrationality. We may think we did a task or did a behavior for a rational reason or for because of X reason, but in reality, it could have actually been something completely different due to our unconscious mind, due to the way that our mind was primed in these certain situations. So that was just a high level summary and some of the core examples in the first chapter of this book, The Neo Unconscious. And really the objective of this was to really show the influence of our unconscious mind, some of the examples, some of the strong examples that the chapter offered, and really give a more deeper understanding into how our mind can really how our unconscious mind can really influence a lot of our decision making, even though this is something that we're not entirely aware of. So hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.